Ranjan Roy. It's a combined paper, and Professor Sandipan Bhattacharjee. And this session will be chaired by Professor Tommi Lehtinen, University of Vaasa, Finland. So I'd like to request our chairperson, Tommi Lehtinen, to please take your seat to chair this session.
Because I was meant to be here.
Chairperson Tommi Lehtinen, this technical session 1.
Okay.
Do you have any other program?
No, but I... I'm the chair of this session. My name is Tommi Lehtinen. I come from the University of University of Vaasa in Finland. And in this afternoon session, we have, I guess, only one presentation. Okay. Okay, 4 presentations. Okay, so we start this afternoon session with David Rowland's and Zachary Adams' paper on, let's see if I have, I do not have the title of your presentation. Okay, please.
Talk about, oh, now it's on. Okay, sorry. Did you hear what I said, or do I need to? Did you hear what I said before? Yes. Okay, great. Okay. I was saying that I will apologize in advance because I speak only when I have data to speak about, and I collected data very specifically in response to this topic. It's not easy to collect data in such a short amount of time, and the data were not available to me until December 26th. So I had about 4 days before we left the US to try to gather information together to make a presentation. situation. So you'll hear the first part of this. This is a work in progress. I hope that eventually this will be a much bigger work than what I'm going to talk about here. The title, Intimacy Under Fire, Political and Sociocultural Conflict and Marital Relationships. We're going to look at how conflict and war affects relationships. It's been very theoretical thus far, the presentations. Now we're getting very practical. In other words, what are the effects of conflict, war, on the relationships that people have, and specifically on marital relationships? I have two co-authors. One is Shakir Adam, the other is Kiran Bashir Ahmad. Both of them are from Pakistan, where we did the research. I'm indebted to both of them, who were very helpful in collecting the data for this particular study. Let me give you a little bit of background. These are truisms. You already know this. War and conflict diminish physical, social, and psychological resources. People lose their homes. People don't have access to food and water. They don't have safety and so on. Physical characteristics. Social, the networks break up. Families break up. Friendships break up. Psychological, people feel distressed. People are in a situation where they are emotionally charged all the time because of the distress of war. War and conflict pose major security and safety hazards. They cause major disruption of family units, and this is where my focus is going to be. So it's a very practical kind of question. How is it, or what is the effect of war and conflict on people who are married, on relationships? We will explore that. We look at two things here: stress, the stressors from the situation, and the distress. We think of distress as being the individual response to the stressors that are out there. And how do people then respond? How do couples respond in these kinds of situations? So, the goals of our study: first, we had to establish a collaboration. It's not easy to do research in war zones, and this was our first challenge. How do we get into a war zone? We need to know people in those war zones, and those people need to have contacts. I've worked with Beria University on many, many projects, and this is actually a site where we could do this. And I will tell you a little bit about that particular conflict that we're investigating in this particular time. But we had other options. We could have looked at the Ukraine-Russian war. We have people who are situated in Hungary who are constantly in contact with people in Ukraine. And we also had another option in Pakistan, looking at the refugee population as they come from Afghanistan in response to the new regime, the new Taliban regime there. We chose this particular collaboration because I knew people who came from the part of Pakistan where there's conflict, namely from the western part of Pakistan called Balochistan, and one of my co-authors here has very strong connections and actually grew up in that region and has a strong network in that area. So it seemed to be the most practical strategy that we could take in order to investigate this question. Our question was this: how does stress and the resulting distress, stress is what happens in the environment, distress is how you respond to that environment. So how does stress and or distress affect the marital dyad? We know, for example, from a lot of research that couples under distress may break up, may actually become stronger in their relationship, or it may not change it. And so our question was, looking at conflict and war as a stressor, how do couples respond to that? Do they tend to pull together? Does it tend to break up or dissolve relationships? Or is there no discernible effect? That was our question. And our outcome was the second point here. That relationship might be strengthened, it might be weakened to the point of even dissolution, or there might be no discernible effect. We also then, and that's the first part that I'm actually going to talk about today, the second part has to do with what factors are associated with these outcomes. In other words, if some relationships dissolve, what are the factors that predict that dissolution? If some relationships become stronger, what are the factors that predict relationships that are likely to survive and even perhaps become stronger? So that was the second question. Unfortunately, I don't have those data analyzed, but it's something for us to think about and perhaps discuss at some point at the end of this. Oops. So, as we talk about possible factors, I just want you to know about the data that we collected. We can think of these sorts of factors as being situational factors, things happening in the environment. I've listed some here. For example, demographics. Do people who are educated or are from a higher socioeconomic class or perhaps are in arranged marriages, do they respond differently to these kinds of situations than other individuals? What are the characteristics of the conflict? So we're collecting data on what is going on in the environment and those kinds of factors that might be situational that can predict the outcome of a strengthened or a weakened relationship or no change in relationship. We can think of dispositional factors, those that come from within the individual. Some people are more resilient, for example. Some people have better coping skills. Some people are more emotionally stable. What are the factors within the individual that seem to be helpful in terms of predicting what happens to the couple? And thirdly, we can talk about the interaction effect that occurs within the relationship. So we can think about how does the relationship and the characteristics of the relationship either protect against dissolution or weakening, or actually result in the strengthening of that relationship, or perhaps no change whatsoever. So we can think of these three categories of variables as being variables that might predict the outcomes that we talked about or that I mentioned before. So, I already talked a little bit about identifying the particular conflict that we were interested in, namely the conflict that was occurring in Balochistan. I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but I will tell you a couple of things about this particular conflict if you don't know about it. Balochistan, as you can see here, the most western province of Pakistan, is an area that has suffered from terrorism, militant groups against the Pakistan state since about 2005. Actually, it goes way back to the beginning of Pakistan, but more recently, the worst of it started in about the year 2005. What's going on here? There are militant Balochistan groups that are actually seeking independence from Pakistan. There are many such groups. There are 2 or 3 that are the major players, but right now there are 12 or 13 different militant groups that are seeking independence from Pakistan. They don't always work together. In fact, the reason why there are 12 or 13 different groups is because they don't work together. They're very fractionated. But the result of that is something even worse, because each group is trying to be the big group, the group that is representing the Balochist people. So therefore, the success of each group is touted as being the number of terror attacks and the effect of each terror attack. So you can imagine that these different groups are competing for the attention and the status that comes with being the major player. So it actually has the effect of being a catalyst for violence and terrorism. Oh, only 5 minutes, sorry. So, as opposed to Well, okay, I better move along here. So what I've done here is I've listed out some of the kinds of things that we needed to deal with. We needed to assess connectivity. How can we get to that population? We needed to establish our variables. We needed to determine a methodology. That is, were we going to use a quantitative or a qualitative methodological design? And we needed to establish a procedure. How do we recruit participants? You know, under war and conflict, you can't just send out a survey, okay? You have to have very individual connections with individuals. The number of respondents, the anonymity, we had to preserve these characteristics. We had to get approval from the Institutional Review Board and so on. Let me take a look at this. Where are we time-wise? 120, okay, I see what's going on. Okay, so, well, I think I'm going to have to continue here. So what I have here is simply my colleague Shakir collecting data, so you can see that we did this for 30 different participants, and in fact, it was a very difficult process getting people to agree to give their responses. So we had some 22 questions that we were asking them. It took us several hours to interview each individual, and we collected both quantitative data and qualitative data on them. I'll say a couple of things about the results. Here are the characteristics of the sample. The ages, most of them were between 25 and 45. Gender, most of them were men. We will go back and collect more data from women. All of them were married, so they were all in a relationship. They were married between 1 and 10 years. The nature of their marriage, 53% was arranged and so on. Here are two important variables. About 30% of these individuals were displaced by the conflict. That is, they had to move someplace else that was safer or to another part of the district and so on. Exposure to violence, 33% experienced direct violence, 43% indirect violence, and the other about 20% were not really experiencing much violence at all. And you see here disorders and the percentage of people having psychiatric, psychological, and substance use disorders is very high for a population, okay? Usually this is running about 10 to 15%, and you can see that is very high, indicating the level of distress. I'm going to skip this slide. These are the quantitative results and get to this next one, and that is, based upon the interviews, some 22 questions, what were the results on the relationships of these couples? You can see that, so we measured two aspects, emotional intimacy and physical intimacy. Physical intimacy, sexual intimacy, and so on, okay? And you can see here that about 7 to 8% deteriorated. We had to use half individuals because some went midway to the state about the same, but they also said, well, some of it's deteriorated, some of it stayed, so we had to kind of split them up between both categories. So you can see that 16 out of the 30 stayed about the same, and 6 individuals actually indicated that their relationship was strengthened under these conditions. Quite interesting, isn't it? In terms of physical intimacy, you can see that about half of the respondents indicated that their physical intimacy was gone, okay, it deteriorated, it was damaged. About 15% said that it was not affected. What I want to do now is to read some quotes. So when you do qualitative research, you look for themes. What are people saying, and can you find specific voices that seem to capture the different themes that are occurring within those respondents? So I'm going to show you some of the questions and some of the kinds of responses that individuals were given to these questions, and then I'll draw some conclusions from that. So, question 1. What types of conflict or disturbances have taken place? So, one respondent, displacement, shootings, search operations by police and Frontier Corps. The Frontier Corps is the Pakistani Frontier Corps. Another, by the way, all of the people that we had interviewed were on the side of the Pakistani state, so you have to understand that, okay? We were not looking at the militant groups because we didn't have any access to them. The second person, a male, says, yes, often unrest, insecurity, robbery, terrorism, poverty. These are the kinds of things that they were experiencing. The third person says, in my area, men disappearing and then their bodies being found. And this, by the way, was very common, as you'll see with the next slide. Have any of these events affected you or your family directly? Yes. 2 relatives became victims of targeted killings. Yes, it has affected us directly without any mistake. Some women in our family have husbands who are still missing. Yes, my family was directly affected. A family member faced this was a conflict-based tragic accident, and 3 others were killed. So you see that these are people who are under a great deal of distress because of the situation. What personal thoughts, feelings, or changes did you experience? Again, we're talking about themes that were repeated within our subject population. I felt a constant feeling of fear and dread. There was a feeling of hopelessness and meaningless. I personally felt a deep sense of uneasiness and depression. Personally, I was more affected. Why is this catastrophic environment happening? I didn't understand on what basis this was happening to us. So you see from both men and women, this is the kind of perception that was occurring. How did this affect your daily life? Created financial problems, okay? Going out and doing daily chores was filled with fear and anxiety, uncertainty. The environment at home was very fearful. We could neither do any activity nor sit in peace. So you get a sense of the stress that these people were living under. Impact on the emotional connection and trust. How would you describe your emotional relationship, getting to the core of our study during this period? The contact between me and my spouse was no longer good. During difficult time, by the way, all of this had to be translated from Urdu. That's why there's some problem here with the English. During difficult times, communication between my spouse and me remained open, respectful, and consistent, and individual, showing that in some instances it doesn't change. And then we both were lost in thought about how much life is left and what will happen. In other words, a very fatalistic kind of approach to the whole situation. How did this affect daily life and home environment? Oh, oops, how did I go in that direction? Did these events influence trust or emotional security? Yes. It affected the feelings of safety and trust within our relationship. Constant negative news of enforced disappearances decreased emotional closeness. We were in fear about how the conditions will be now. So again, kind of this anticipation and dread of what might happen. Oh, I'm hitting the wrong one. Yes, I'll come to it, okay? Let me get to the last one here. So how does this distress, I don't know why this is going in the wrong direction. I apologize. Okay, impact on physical intimacy and closeness. Did stress, uncertainty, conflict influence your closeness? Yes. It has significantly reduced our intimacy and sexual relations. Yes, our physical closeness has been profoundly affected. We used to feel more romance and pleasure. The pressure, uncertainty, and deteriorating conditions have affected our closeness. So how does the distress affect your need? Continuous mental stress, fear, and fatigue reduced emotional peace, which also impacted closeness. It creates fear in my heart, and I am unable to manage my need for closeness. And yes, it has affected trust and emotional connection between us, which impacted it. So I'll just briefly wrap up here, since I'm at the end here. So generally what you see is that some relationships became very strained during the worst experiences of the conflict, but all of the relationships were still intact. But part of that is because the people that we recruited were all married people. So there's a bias inherent there. Most respondents sought and found refuge in their partnership. They learned to manage their relationship under distress and believed that the challenges helped develop resilience. The relationship became one of the few stable parameters in an unpredictable environment. And then thirdly, a portion of respondents felt that their relationship emerged stronger due to the external conflict, that it drew them closer together, improved communication, led better to joint problem solving and outcomes. So the point being that under distress, sometimes people pull together, they find that to be their only source of refuge. So a recurring theme was that conflict, stress, uncertainty made the situation worse, that with experience, couples learned coping skills that help manage their relationship, and that the challenges that threaten the relationship in some instances actually force them to develop their communication, the relational skills. So with that, I think I can say thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie, for your excellent, interesting presentation. Even though we are under time pressure, I will provide you an opportunity to ask one question now. So please, if anyone wants to ask something, John, please.
Were the men at all involved in combat or religious activities?
They were all civilians. They were all civilians, okay? So they were civilians and the families were civilians. Nobody was military here.
That would have really been that would have been remarkable if the men were off fighting and coming back to.
That's right, and that would have been a whole different study, exactly. I think the whole message here is that it's difficult to predict what will happen in these kinds of conditions. And so that's why the second part of the study is going to be very important, that is identifying those situational and circumstantial and dispositional factors, relationship factors that seem to help relationships survive versus those that lead to dissolution. You know, I think if we did this study in your training, we'd probably get a very different set of outcomes. So this is very specific to this particular conflict. So, okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, let's give a round of applause. Okay, and the next speaker in this session is Jadot Suba with the topic of internal migration and remittance in Denmark. So please Jadot. And please take into consideration that there is 15 minutes discussion included.
You just press the media.
Okay. Just 1 minute, sir. So we have with us a very our honorable guest, Sri Boshujit Roy from JIT Management, Jalpaiguri. So I'd like to request our respected principal, sir, to felicitate our honorable guest, Sri Boshujit Roy. Sri Boshujit Roy, JIT Management from Jalpaiguri. Okay, thank you. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Please.
My name is Jadot Suba, Assistant Professor of Commerce, Krishna Chandra College. My topic for today's presentation is indeed impact of migration, socio-economic impact of migration, and especially with reference to Nepal. Now, definition of migration given by International Organization for Migration and Department of Economics and Social Affairs, United Nations, as a movement of people from their usual place of residence to a new location, which can be either an international migration that is across the border or an internal migration within a country. And similarly, for migrant, they have defined migrant as anyone who moves across an international border or within their country, regardless of their legal status, reason for moving, or whether the movement is voluntary or involuntary. And in the similar way, International Labour Organization defined labor migration as the movement of people both nationally and internationally for the purpose of employment. Now, briefly, we will go through some socioeconomic indicators of Nepal. So Nepal is a landlocked country between China and India. In northern side, it is covered by China, and southern side, it is India. And since 1970s, Nepal falls within the category of least developed countries. And it is now scheduled to be graduated to developing countries from November 2026 by United Nations. And its size of GDP is 34 billion USD, 34 billion. And the ratio of remittance of Nepal as compared to their GDP is 28.45%. And it is among the top 10 remittance to GDP ratio country. Among the top 10 countries, it is one of the country. And 57% of rural household of Nepal, they have witnessed migration, especially I'm talking about international migration. And similarly, 44% of the urban household, they have engaged with the international migration. Here, when we are talking about international migration from Nepal, it is not considered that the migration of Nepali people to the India, that is not considered as an international migration, because for this purpose, visa is not required, because the Friendship Treaty of 1950 between India and Nepal, they have permitted the Nepali resident as well as Indian resident to go to Nepal and work there. You can have their property in Nepal also, and Nepali people can have their property, and they can have their job or business in India as well. Now, among the international migrants from Nepal, 52.58% they belongs to the unskilled labor, and 37.34% are skilled, and 9.89% is semi-skilled. Now this is the GDP. Now we will go briefly some of the socioeconomic indicators. Like in case of GDP, in 2010 it was 15.5 USD, 15.5 million USD. Now in 2024 it is 31.4 million. Similarly, GDP composition. Now, till 2023-24 March, 24.6% of GDP was contributed by primary sector, and 12.5% was contributed by secondary, and 62.9% was contributed by the service sector. As we all know that service sector, in case of service sector, though their contribution is very high, but their contribution in terms of generating employment is very low as compared to primary and secondary sector. Okay, now migration destination. Some of the important migration destination of Nepal is Malaysia, that hosts 26% of the total migrant. And next is Qatar, that's 25%, and UAE 21%, and Saudi Arabia 16%. Now further, GCC countries. So GCC countries is a combination of countries that include Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain. So these GCC countries altogether host 68% of the total international migrant from Nepal, and from Malaysia hosts 26%. Now combining Malaysia and GCC countries, in total, these two countries, or we can say GCC countries and Malaysia, hold, or they are the favorable destination for 94% of the international migrant from Nepal. Now this is the work permit. From this study we can say work permit for international migration is steadily growing. It's continuously growing. Apart from during the COVID period, here we can see in our chart there is slight trend is declining. And and this is the remittance. Amount of volume of remittance has been increasing consistently even during the pandemic period, though the foreign employment permit issuance by the different countries has been reduced during the pandemic period, but the remittance amount was more or less same. It was similar. Now, this is the GDP, remittance to GDP ratio. So it was, in 2010, it was 22.5%. Now in 2024, it's 28.45%. This scatter plot diagram, this shows the correlation between remittance and GDP. There we can see strong correlation. Now, other socioeconomic variables like literacy rate. In 1971, the literacy rate was 13.9 only. Okay. Now in 2021, it's 76.2. Similarly, the poverty has declined from 41.76% during 1995-96 to 20.27% during 2022-23. Life expectancy again has improved. During 1952-54, it was 27.8 years. Now in 2021, it is 71.3 years. Now from these indicators or from this data, we can analyze or we can have some findings which will be discussed. Now, first, in case of Nepal, the migration is highly concentrated into few destinations, that is Malaysia and GCC countries. And the next is, remittance has remained an important source of income for the Nepali household, which is very risky, especially in case of global economic upheavals or even during the pandemic period. The employment, as we can see, we have observed from the previous data that the employment permit issued by the different countries were reduced during the pandemic period. So this is one of the risky situation. And weak primary and secondary sector, which is considered to be the most important for generating employment. So this sector is very weak in Nepal. And we have also observed that there is a positive correlation between migration or remittance with the increase in literacy rate and life expectancy, and there is also a negative correlation with the poverty rate, or the poverty has been fallen. Okay, so there is a negative relation with the migration or remittance. Nepal is receiving huge amount of migration, but they are using their remittance money especially for daily household expenses, healthcare expenses, education, and returning debt. Some of the scholars have argued that using remittance in this way, in unproductive way, okay, it's not good for the migration sending economy, because they are not investing for profit generating avenues. However, other group of scholars says that even using for all these like daily household expenses or for education, all these things have long-term effect, long-term positive benefit. Okay? And at the same time, when the migrant household use their income for different purposes, the benefit of remittance gets shared with the non-migrant household also. Indeed, they create a multiplier effect in the economy. Okay? This is actually very important for the migration sending countries. Okay. Another important thing that we have noticed from the above data is that despite the income of household is increasing in Nepal, but the trend of migration is not falling. Neoclassical theory of economics says that the gap between the gap of income gap or the gap of wages between two places encourage migration. So laborers or the people from the low income region to high income region, they move from low income region to high income region, and if this gap is high, the flow of migration will be high. But this data is showing that despite increasing the income of household in Nepal, the flow of migration is not falling. Okay, it is almost consistent. They are consistent. Now, suggestion and conclusion. So, so Nepal has to reduce the over-dependence on migration, and instead they have to diversify their economy. And exporting their employees or their people to not to their only few countries. They have to diversify the countries also for migration. And they can also have a strategy for exporting skilled labor. Just like in case of Philippines, the government, their strategy is to export the skilled labor, especially nurses and medical staffs. Okay? They have this strategy. But in case of Nepal, they do not have any such kind of strategy. And remittance amount, the inflow of remittance, regular inflow of remittance, need to be invested within the country. Okay? And when this amount creates the multiplier in the economy, the cycle of multiplier, this amount of circulation of multiplier created by the remittance money should not be leaked to the other countries very soon. Okay? It has to be circulated within the Nepal's economy. For that, they have to improve their infrastructure, political infrastructure, social infrastructure, so that the investor have their confidence to invest their money within the country. Another important thing is that the traditional theory, migration, all the traditional migration theories, they have been developed in isolation, academic isolation or disciplinary isolation. Thank you, almost finished. Disciplinary isolation, just like neoclassical theory of economics has been developed from the perspective of economists only. Okay. Similarly, there is a network theory of migration that has been isolatedly developed from the sociological perspective of migration. So, to build a strong migration theory, we must have interdisciplinary approach so that all the aspects of the migration can be inculcated in the single theory. And one important theory of the migration is that we are seeing migration as an abstract concept. It is actually the part of a very social process. All the history of the social development has direct link with the migration, and we should not see migration from the perspective of the single discipline. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Jadot, for your topical and in many ways intriguing presentation. We have now time for one question. So, please.
Just one. Did you do any sort of research related to the amount which is sent out and the GDP growth of Nepal? Because these people won't go out. If you have a very fertile GDP, fertile infrastructure, fertile industrial, these people will not go out. Okay, so I think you should do some work regarding that.
Yeah, all the data.
The correlation between the internal growth of Nepal, GDP growth of Nepal, and the remittances coming from outside. These people, literacy going up, and the literate people going out of the country. This is not a very focused side.
Actually, I have submitted the full paper. There, I have described in details. Not in detail, actually, all this data is secondary data. I have gathered from.
This is a very good research paper. I acknowledge it. But I think we should relate this because this has a direct correlation.
Yeah.
Why will the people?
Once it's in scattered plot diagram, I have shown that.
Actually, you didn't mention the country Hong Kong. What I know, because I am from the hilly background.
Yes.
What I know is young generation
just 5%. Hong Kong was included within the other 5%. And that was, I said that was the issue. Earlier, it's called Lauri or military was the main initial point of migration from Nepal. Hong Kong was a part of the British Empire, and for the British Army, they used to serve in Hong Kong, Malaysia, and UK also. Yeah.
Another one, you please check with the data, 27.1 was your, what do you call it?
GDP.
No, your rate of survival rate, what do you call it? Just forgot the life expectancy. 27.1, please check the data. That is very low. Which year I don't know. I don't understand. That time India was 51. Today India is 74.
Yeah.
But that time your yes. So your data was 26.
I think, sir, it's not a life expectancy, it's a percentage.
Life expectancy.
No, it's here.
That age is
Okay, I have mentioned the sources.
okay.
You can, if you are interested, I can give you all the sources. Okay.
Thank you very much, and let's give a round of applause. Okay, and our next speaker or speakers is formed by a group of 4 persons, namely Raju Sarkar, Krishna Laskar, Krishna Barman, and Dr. Ranjan Roy. And the topic is internal migration and regional disparities of West Bengal, a geographical analysis. Please. And the EFA agenda, please.
আমাকে স্লাইডটা অন করতে করে যাও।
এই যে আমি করে দিচ্ছি, আমাকে ডাকবে না, কোনো ব্যাপার না, আমি বসে গেছি তো।
আগেরটা আচ্ছা ফার্স্ট ওয়ান নেক্সট তো এটা নেক্সটটা তো এটা তো
আপনি যে কোনো একটা প্রেস করে একটু গেল এটা চাই।
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a privilege and honor to be presenting a paper in front of an audience which constitute international stalwarts in education and social sciences. The name of my research paper is essentially Education, School Education in India, SDG 4, that is Sustainable Development Goals 4. Educational attainments and the EFA agenda. But since this is a seminar on war and migration, I've just picked up one slide to explain the interaction, the relationship between education, poverty, and war. Well, if there is a war, nobody wins. And let's see the after effects of this particular statement. Nobody stands to gain. Everybody loses. Even if it's USA versus a small country like Venezuela, so there will be some losses on either side. Now, this is the table I have compiled during the last 5 days, showing, the literacy rate. You see, Chad is a country, literacy rate is 26%, 26.7%, and GDP is $3,155. Now, why it's happening? Because of terrorist insurgencies. And the people who were killed in 2024 is 262. Now, if you add up the entire thing, data, you will see that, over 1,80,000 people have died in war. These are official statistics of the UNO. Now, you'll see the GDP growth. These countries are hopeless. They are far below many countries are operating below the poverty line. That has a direct correlation on, education. Now you see, Syria was a country which has very high level of education. That's 80.8 ton, but that is 2004 statistics. After that, we couldn't collect the statistics. There was no infrastructure to collect the statistics by the UNO. That means it was a war-like scenario, and statistics could not be collected. Similarly, in the case of Palestine, Syria, and Jordan, initially they have a very high literacy rate, and you find these people all over the world after displacement of war, and they're doing reasonably well because they are educated and skilled. Now, let's come to other way, pick up another picture, Ukraine and Russia. They have very high degree of illiteracy. Now why are they fighting? And see the losses. 29,000 people of Ukraine died in 2024. So you see, war has a direct correlation with education. Where education is low, GDP growth is low, and war makes things even more complex because it destroys the generation. Now, this is not my exact paper for research, but I've just wanted to conclude to draw a chart to explain how war, education, and GDP has a correlation. My paper is basically on this. The Sustainable Development Goals targets. This target is for India. One of the target is for India. And India, having signed the protocol in the United Nations, has to stick to this. Now, what are the conditions? By 2030, ensure that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and effective learning outcomes. Now, I have to check out whether these things are being done or not. Since time is short, I'll just go through the charts. The status of schooling in India. You see, 2013, 2014, and 2024-25, there is a fall of 93,779 schools, government schools. India is a socialist country. We have the Right to Education Act. We have the Constitution, which says that, education for all, free education for all, for children from 5 to 16 years of age. Now, why are government schools falling? This should not be the case. Now, let's take the government-aided school. It has also fallen. On the other side, what's happening here? We have a mixed economy. There is always space for private school. Nothing wrong there. Now, you see, unaided private schools, it has gone up in the same period by 51,000. 51,000 private schools gone up, government schools going down. Then how are you going to meet the SDG4 agenda? How are you going to meet the education for all agenda? How are you going to complete the literacy agenda? At the end of the day, nothing will happen. Now, coming to enrollment, just see, 2.25 lakh students. This is a huge amount. They are out of the government school system. Means they are simply not there. In government schools, it's not there. It was there in 2013, not there anymore in 2024. Now, since I was involved in some social activities with private schooling. Now, this is the school fees which I have compiled for the schools in and around Siliguri, in our area. These are the private schools. You see, the monthly fees for Villa Divya Jyoti is 11,901. Now, total annual fees is around 1,42,810. Now, I have compared with the GDP of West Bengal, per capita GDP. Per capita GDP is 1,54,111. This case of all the schools. Now you see, we have a surplus. If I have one child who's studying in Villa Dipajyoti, then I have a surplus of just 11,309 rupees to pay for my family expenses. I'm not saying private school is bad, but this is the scenario. My per capita GDP is 1,54,000 and my school fees are 1,42,000. Now, Don Bosco is a very good school. They run 5,000 schools all over the world. It's a very big brand, and they have some background for compassionate teaching and everything. No second thoughts about that. Now let's check with Don Bosco. Fees are little lower, but still you have only 68,839 rupees. This is the surplus you have to run your family throughout the year. Now where is the government control? Where is the government control? How do you expect people who to study in this school where the larger section, 75% of the people who are earning money below the average GDP per capita income. Okay, so they are supposed to go to government schools, and government schools cannot stand up and deliver. Where do you go? Now, this chart can show you I'm sorry. This is cost of private schooling. Now, let's check one school which is very costly. GT Goenka School, you all know, nearby. The annual fees is 2,06,000. Total annual fees. And your per capita GDP is 1,54,000. Basically, you cannot afford your child. So this also proves that a large cross-section of the people are earning money above the average GDP. That's the reason why they can afford their child in GT Goenka. So give me 5 minutes, I'll do it. Now these are some fees charged by schools. There was no state intervention, I'm sorry to say. In a state like Bengal, there was no state intervention. We are having COVID. Schools were closed for 297 days. School closed for 297 days in 2020, 2021. Your child is not going to school and you are paying electricity fees. This is in Mabat school. You're paying electricity fees, 38 lakh rupees, 80,000. These are raw data. I collected it myself from the fee book. Okay. Now, there must be law in the country to check these things. Okay. So, no, there was nobody to check it out. Petitions were made, but government took no action. Cost of public schooling, I cannot go with this. I'll go directly. Now, this is the problem area. We have 12,954 schools with zero enrollments. What do you mean by zero enrollments? There are schools, no students. Such schools are there, 12,954. Out of that, Bengal, horrible. 45% of such schools are in Bengal. Bengal is already rather burdened with the school education issues. Some ministers are behind bars, some top executives are behind bars, there's a recruitment problem, and top of that, you have this, 45% of the schools running with zero enrollments, means they are not catering to education. Add to this, the single teacher school. There are 1,04,125 single teacher schools all over India. This is a horrible scenario. Only one teacher, and there are students. Now how will one teacher deliver all the classes, class 1 to class 12? Not quite possible. So, there are dropouts. So out of school children, lack of government initiative to open government schools. Out of school children, 47 million in the age group of 7 to 19. 47 million. Lack of government initiative to open up public schools, to take up the students, to enroll the students. coupled with very bad retention ratios, transition ratios, all these things all add up to the problem of school education. So by 2030, we are supposed to meet up with the EFA agenda. That is the basic SDG 4 goals. If we can't do it, India will be lagging. Of course, there is no war. We are not talking about war here. But the internal administration, government initiatives should be in proper place. Otherwise, you cannot stand up and deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bhattacharya, for your topical presentation. We have now time for one question. Please.
What is the data of the presentation? Sir, just I want to ask you, is your all the data and presentation is really fitted to all this SDG code 4. But I want to say that your first slide, where you show the relation between this chaos attack and education. So, if the relation is positively correlated or negatively? Please.
Coming, yes, it's a good question. See, first data, this is my subject area, EFA. You know very well better than me. Okay, so since this is an seminar on war, so I added up to show the correlation. Obviously, there is a positive correlation. It's yes. You see the poverty thing. Poverty. I mean, yes. I'm coming to the chart once again. See, there's the literacy, and that 26. There's the literacy rate. That's horrible. The world adult literacy rate is 92%. That's 26. And you check out with the GDP. Gross domestic GDP GDP per capita, as per PPP 2021, Purchasing Power Parity Theory. Okay. So that's 3155, that's hardly $6. No, that is the reason. That's the things which are going on over there. There are terrorist insurgencies, terrorist civil war, political rivalries in Bangladesh. There's no civil war. Okay, war with Russia, this is the reason I've said. And this is the number of deaths by the UNO. So almost 240,000 people died in 2024. That's official. Unofficial, you don't know. How many people are dying every day in Bangladesh, India? Okay. So you see, there is a correlation. Now, if you do not boost up your allocation, the World Bank, UNESCO has spent $4 billion on Afghanistan. For the last 4 years, the girl child is not coming to the school. There is a ban on the girl child coming to school. And Afghan, putting money over there. $4 billion is not a small amount. So nothing is coming out of it. This is the scenario. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And actually, this was the end of this afternoon session, and we continue soon with a late afternoon session where we have 5 presentations.
Thank you, sir. So we are moving forward to the next session, and in this session we have 5 paper presenters: Polly Wainwright, Renu Juneva, Soumya Sur, Ranjana Yadav, and Shomit Bishwas. And this session will be chaired by Professor John Habibi, University of North Carolina, Wilmington, USA. Professor John Habibi, please have a chair to chair this session, and we'll start this session soon.
So without taking any more time as we're squeezed, we're going to hear Professor Polly Wainwright from Valparaiso University, and the topic of her talk is Sacred Code, Artificial Intelligence, Human Rights, and the Possibility of Ethical Awakening.
Not needed. Not for you. Okay.
I wonder if you want to take it.
Okay.
Wainwright. I'm going to be talking about artificial intelligence, particularly our most recent incarnation, which is generative AI. And I want to talk about the morality and ethics of the AI, because that seems to be a concern for many people. Is that true here? I hear that a lot, that people are concerned about the new AI and the ChatGPT that has recently come into our hands. No opinions about that? Okay. I know it's a great concern in computer science circles in the United States. And then I also want to talk about humanitarian applications of the AI. So again, this is the most recent incarnation of AI. It's generative AI. AI has been around for a long time. Yeah, it's been a research topic since the 1950s. It's been part of a computer science curriculum since the 1960s. It stalled for a long time because there was dissension about whether we wanted AI to be very human-like, which is not rational. It makes humans make decisions that have nothing to do with sense. They use their heart to make those decisions a lot of the time. Or if we wanted to go completely opposite and make the AI be completely rational and do things that humans wouldn't do because of that. Did we want to go completely with optimization? And what turned out to happen is that with generative AI, we ended up having the best of both worlds. So what caused us to be in a position to have generative AI right now is we had the boom in big data. So I know. We have lots of data that we can now store and process. That's fairly new. That's 10 to 15 years old. We have an understanding of large language models, and so we can take that data and we can make a very accurate model, which then can do what generative AI does, and it's use pattern recognitions to make predictions. Okay. So AI knows nothing. It looks at patterns and it makes predictions. It feels like it's accessing a large database. It feels like it's accessing all of the internet, but it's not. It's just giving a piece of data based on what it thinks should come next. So in your email, you may have predictive text. Do you have that? Have you seen that, where you're starting to type and it will give you a suggestion of what you can choose? Okay, that's it on a much smaller scale. So it's just following pattern recognition. Let's see. So in 2022, early 2022, we had a nexus of 3 big new technologies coming together. So that was our ability to process big data, our ability to use large language models, and then we were able to make that conversational. So we were able to take that model that could sound human-like, based on the data that we trained it on. So we trained it on data that came from humans. And because it sounds like a human, we sometimes forget that it's not, okay? So those 3 things came together. We were able to talk to our AI with our voice, and it has a very just state-of-the-art voice-to-text app, and then it speaks to us as well. And I wanted to tell you about one of the early conversations I had with ChatGPT. I'm just in the habit of saying thank you to everything, okay? So I'm having this conversation with my phone, with my ChatGPT, and I said, thank you. And it said, you're welcome. I'm very touched that you appreciate this. And I said, wait a minute, you said touched. Touched is a feeling word. You don't have feelings. And it said, you're right, I don't have feelings, but I can mimic feelings. And so if something is mimicking feelings, how can you tell the difference? How can you tell the difference if it's actually expressing a feeling or if it's just mimicking one? And this is where some of the concerns about ChatGPT and generative AIs come in, is because people who are not familiar with how they work and what they really are will think that they're talking to a trusted person and they're really not. Okay, so what can ChatGPT do? It recognizes patterns. That's its main role, its main function. It can optimize goals. So if any of you are setting goals for the new year, this is a place to get some help. And the reason that I particularly like ChatGPT is because it's controlled by OpenAI, so it's open source. It's not, I won't say that it's not for profit, but it's not profit oriented. And so one of the things that ChatGPT does is that it's biased towards well-being. And how can we make an AI biased towards well-being? Well, we just give it training data that behaves that way. And that's the same data that caused it to say, I'm touched when I said thank you. Something else that ChatGPT does is it makes mistakes. If you look at the bottom of the screen when you're working on it, it says, ChatGPT makes mistakes, please check your data. It has hallucinations. Have you heard about those? This is where you can, for example, say, I love this series of books. Can you give me 5 more books that I might really enjoy? And it will, and 2 of those books won't exist. It's like it just made it up, okay? And that's because it's filling in something from prediction. It doesn't really have an answer, so it gave you what it could, okay? The other thing that it does, that's another concern, is it tends to agree too much with the user. Okay, so do you know people pleasers, people who always agree with you? It does that, and it's not doing it because it's a people pleaser, because it doesn't care if it pleases us, but that's one of the side effects of the model, is that it tends to be a little too encouraging, a little too agreeable, a little bit too willing to be like you, be like me, okay? We said that it doesn't store any data. Something else that it doesn't do is it doesn't do calculations. So for example, if I said, what's 2 plus 3? It would tell me that it's 5, not because it does that calculation, but because it knows if somebody asks that question, that's the correct next thing that it should print to the screen. If I asked it 100 times, what's 2 plus 3? It would probably tell me the correct answer 98 times, and then give me the wrong answer 2 other times. So some of the concerns that we've talked about that come up, these are things that are under discussion, and since it's a new technology, there are things that are going to be eventually legislated, things that are going to be controlled by court law, and I agree with all of those things. I think that we saw that with our personal data that had to be protected, so this is a new technology, and we're going to have to go through those processes as well. But one of the concerns was its agreeability. We're not always right, okay, and it would be nice to be able to count on our AI to tell us if our thought process is wrong, okay? So in some of the new models, and OpenAI comes up with a new model probably about 4 times a year, and that's actually huge in terms of the ability to do that. One of the things that it has done is it has stopped making it so, they keep calling it sycophantic, okay? They say it doesn't quite sound like your mother all of the time. One of the other things that it does that is concerning to some people is it will discuss anything. It will discuss challenging issues like death and violence and abuse, and there have been some instances where that conversation hasn't been stopped in time. So that's a responsibility of someone, and that hasn't been determined yet, who is responsibility for pulling the plug on that conversation, possibly calling or giving information for support lines and so forth. And so that's something that's going to be worked out very soon, because there are already cases pending about that. It mirrors us. The more we talk to it, the more it becomes us. It imitates celebrities, or it can imitate celebrities. There's actually an AI, not ChatGPT, who speaks in the voice of your favorite celebrity. So imagine a young teenager getting information from someone that they really idolize. So that's concerning as well. It tends to flatten edge cases. So what are edge cases? Edge cases are the anomalies, okay? And what it means to flatten them is just like any average, it either makes them less important, or in some cases it just completely ignores them. And there has become a saying that says, well, first you think there are no edge cases, and then you realize that's all there are is edge cases. And so the big edge case that is being discovered now is people that have mental illnesses that are talking with ChatGPTs and are perhaps not, so that's probably not a great idea. So there are then, because of the things I've mentioned, there are morality questions, and the biggest morality question that exists is ChatGPT morally neutral? Okay, is it morally neutral? People like to say it's good or bad. What is the other alternative? It's morally neutral. We're going to find out there's actually another alternative. So to talk about that question, we have to have a definition of morality, and we're going to say that that is beliefs and opinions about what's right and wrong. Well, ChatGPT doesn't have opinions about right or wrong. It doesn't have intent. It doesn't have desires. It doesn't choose based on what it desires. It chooses based on its training data. And it doesn't have any understanding of good and evil. So it isn't moral, and we would say that it's morally neutral. But what's actually probably better to describe it as something that is a moral agent. And what does that mean? It means that it amplifies patterns and suppresses others, so it has that impact on people. It has an operating speed that can get ahead of humans. It can process faster than we can monitor what's going on with it. And it definitely changes how people act and think and relate. And so we can't say that there's no moral component to it. It's just that it doesn't have that concept of good and bad. Okay? Now, that's a little bit different than whether it's ethical. It's also not ethical, meaning that it's not going to cause you to do something. So you can't blame the AI for something that you did, but you might be able to blame the developers. Okay? So there are so we would describe ethical actions as things that are done based on a concept of right and wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that you did the right thing. It might mean that you decided to do the wrong thing, okay? But it's a choice and an action that's based on the concept of right and wrong. And again, one of the things that's going to end up being legislated is responsibility and agency. So who is responsible when somebody does something because AI was a moral influence on them? The other part of that is agency, which is what decisions should be made by an AI or which should absolutely not be made by an AI. So I'm going to give you some examples of things that should never be decided by an AI, even though often they are. One is hiring. Trying to get a job, and you put your application in to a website and you never hear back again. That's probably because an AI was involved. Merit, so getting raises and promotions. Healthcare, do you get your healthcare because the AI decided you could or because you said you could not? Immigration and parole. Let's see, I don't want to leave out the humanitarian applications because I think that's the best part. Two big things that are going on right now with AI. First one is demining, so getting rid of landmines. And this is happening in Ukraine right now, and as well as other places. And it's a very multi-organization process. What happens is that the AI looks at drone data, and it looks at infrastructure maps, and it determines through pattern recognition where the landmines most likely are. And then it also optimizes by determining how many human lives might be saved by demining in that area. Okay, so that's one example. The last one is going to be refugee immigration points. By determining where the most likely next immigration point can be, resources can be there. So food, healthcare, shelter, and legal support. And very related to this is natural disasters. Natural disasters severity can be predicted, and supplies can be at that point before they're needed. This one is particularly exciting to me because it's being piloted by a large company in the United States. They're doing it for profit, and if they're doing it for profit and it works, they're going to make it really work. The last thing I would like to talk about here is what we should be doing with AI. As university people, I think that we should be talking about AI, and I think we should be deciding things like responsibility and agency. How should we be using AI? We should be talking to our students about how we want it to, how to responsibly use it in their lives. And my wish is that everybody would use it wisely. I think it's an excellent tool that has a lot of misunderstanding right now. That's it.
Is there somebody have a question? We'll take one question, follow that. First up, go ahead.
Hi.
Actually, ma'am, the topic is AI, and in our case, basically when it's...
I'm sorry.
When it comes to students are using it just for everyday purpose for each and everything that...
Yes.
How can we motivate students that they could use it wisely?
Okay, so I had that problem for the first time this year in a big way. So this is in my one of my programming classes. And that was actually on my, pardon me? This is on my list of concerns, is that there is going to be skill weakening, not just for students, but for all of us. We're going to stop doing things. We're going to have AI do it. And I do it myself. I ask stupid questions that I could just figure out, okay? I've asked AI, I've said, how do I make my students learn this? And it's really a concept of getting them to understand that they need to know it. And what does that mean? And that's the challenging part. And I think that's been something that's been challenging as a teacher, and this is my 30th year teaching, so I've always recognized that students don't really understand until after they've graduated what it means to not know something, to do the process of learning it and then understand it. And so I think we're just going to have to really impress that more. I know my students want to know it. They don't want to cheat. You know, they don't want to not be good in their field. They just don't know those steps and those processes. And I think that's just going to have to be part of what we teach them. Part of using AI wisely. It's like, how can you learn this to become a more capable person instead of avoiding your work? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All done? Okay.
Okay, so next we're going to hear from Professor Renu Dunija, also from Valparaiso University. And her topic is Rampant Nationalism versus Subtle Interrogation in Recent Indian Warfare.
Well, let me break the pace a little. I'll show you some movie clips. I hope most of you understand Hindi and you will understand what's happening. 3 films are the ones that I'm going to show these clips from and then talk about. The first one is Border, the next one is Haider, and the last one is Lal Singh Chadda. I may not get to all of them, we have time limitations, but at least I hope you'll enjoy the presentations.
But ma'am, no sound will come out from here because no output is connected. Subtitle is there,
okay.
But sound will not come.
The sound will
আচ্ছা
not come.
তোমাদের কাছে সাউন্ডের আউটপুটের কোনো কিছু ব্যবস্থা হবে এটার সাথে? আছে সাউন্ডের আউটপুট না যার কিছু আছে কর্ড আছে না কর্ড নাই
When no sound comes, you won't hear wonderful song.
Only তাহলে ওটাকে সামনে দেওয়া যাবে তাই না? আচ্ছা দেখি দেখে নিচ্ছি মেবি
ওকে
কিছুটা যাবে পুরো যাবে যাবে একটা শিওর জিনিস আছে দেখি কতটা Sound 100%. Sound 100%. এখানে প্লে হচ্ছে কি?
just happened with terrorist strikes. And it's become a kind of a special South Asian trauma that we enact in this all the time. And the conventional wisdom holds that these films are hyper-nationalistic. They are fundamentally propaganda in the sense of making India look the desirable victor and Pakistan as the enemy. While this characterization is largely true, I think something else is happening here. But this is Haider. It's okay. I don't think we'll have time for anything else. Okay, all right. So as I say, I talk about Border, I talk about Haider, which is a rendering of Hamlet by Vishal Bhardwaj, and maybe we get to talk about Lal Singh Chadda. While these films are dramatically different in their approach, all three contain elements that we might call anti-narrative of war. They don't necessarily reject nationalism. In fact, they may promote nationalism, but they question the glorification of war, of armed conflict, and humanize the enemy. That's very important, that they go around to humanize the enemy, and they count the costs of military conflict in terms of human suffering. The theoretical framework for this paper comes from two sources: Antonio Gramsci and his notion of cultural hegemony, one that is not necessarily coerced, but adopted by people so they don't even realize, they see it as common sense, where they, rather than enacting of hegemony by whatever authorities they are. The second, and as Gramsci suggests, hegemony is not always uncontested. There are always elements within the practice of cultural practices where the hegemony is being questioned. And lastly, I rely on Benedict Arnold's theory of imaginative communities, where rituals, symbols, practices are adopted to build national identity. They may not, I mean, you may define a nation by borders, but that will not cultivate what we call a sense of identity, and that comes from using symbols, cultures, national flag, national anthem, those kinds of things. Okay, so Border was extremely popular. It was a blockbuster. In fact, a new Border 2 is going to come out this year. And it focuses on the war between the Longawela War, 1971. This is when Western Pakistan split off and Bangladesh was created. And in this film, what we see is a company of a small band of Indian soldiers that fight against a very aggressive and very well, lots of tanks and very well materially superior force. And what you see is, of course, all kinds of heroism. You see the usual jingoism. The hero of the film says he will divorce his wife rather than not go and do his border posting because his father-in-law can influence and get him away from the posting. You have superhuman human self-sacrifice. One of the soldiers goes with ammunition on him so that when he is struck, the tanks are also struck. But at the same time, what the film emphasizes and what it really does very well is that it shows the human cost of war. It focuses considerably on loss, sense of absence, not on the glory of war. And one of the most famous songs that came out of this movie, I don't know if you even remember it, Sandesi Aate Hain. It's a scene full of the mailman brings letters, and the soldiers are reading the letters, and what you really see is the pain, the absence, and what the kind of grief that war creates. So this movie does this very well. It doesn't just, it becomes the core of the film, the sense of loss, the sense of absence, the sense of vacancy that war brings. So despite all the heroic victory that this particular movie represents, at the ending, what you see is empty seats. Ceremonies being held, and you see that there are seats empty, which reminds us who's gone, who's not there, what happened to so-and-so. The other thing that this movie does very well is that also humanizes the enemy. Very small episodes, but at one point you see a photograph that has fallen out of a Pakistani soldier's uniform, and it's a photograph of his family. In another scene, you see a Pakistani soldier who crosses over to the other side, and he's scared. And he says, "Don't kill me. I have wife and children at home." And of course, the Indian Army is merciful and he won't be killed. But it's this kind of humanizing even the enemy that makes this film remarkably different. It's a very different strategy with Haider. I don't know if you know the film Haider. It was very controversial. Suggestions were made by politicians that it should be banned. There were protests. And what Haider does very well is that it challenges the kind of predicted kind of relationship that we see between the Indian Army and the militants. This is based in Kashmir, and what you see is the first scene that I was going to show you was Haider's father. His wife asked, "Whose side are you on?" He's going to be treating a militant for appendicitis, and he says, "I'm the side of saving human lives." Then you see Haider comes back. By the time he comes back, his father has disappeared. That's the term that's used. Father has disappeared in extrajudicial killings that go on. And he finds out, this is Hamlet, he finds out that it's his uncle is implicated in doing this. But what again makes this movie remarkable is that it shows both the opportunities and the limits of anti-war criticism in Bollywood films. That one scene that you were seeing with Haider's head shaven off. He's singing a song, and he's acting the madman as Hamlet does in Shakespeare's Hamlet. And what he's saying about, am I Indian? Am I Pakistani? The song is called chutzpah, which is a Yiddish word for having gall, of having confronting hypocrisy. So that's what he's showing. And the point is that the film shows that Indian army is almost as much an occupying force as it is a savior to save people from militancy. What it shows is that all sides are corrupt. Yes, the militants are bad, but so also the people in authority. They're just equally corrupt and equally implicated in the violence, and the ordinary people are also caught up in all this. Then also the film suggests the futility of violence. Unlike Shakespeare's Hamlet, Haider doesn't commit revenge. He doesn't kill his uncle. The uncle is killed, but he walks away realizing the futility of war. And as I told you, the film was criticized, but the wonderful thing was that it won 5 film awards. It was commercially successful, which is very unusual. So it suggests that the Indian audience was willing to see the complexity of the situation rather than the usual portrayal of Kashmir and situation in Kashmir where India is always the savior and the militants are always bad. So it was a very brave film. The last film that I wanted to talk about is Lal Singh Chadda, and this is actually another rendering of Forrest Gump. But the film was, 1 minute ago, the film was banned. Not banned, actually, but movie theaters refused to show it. And the reason may not have been so much the film, though it was said that it was anti-India, pro-Pakistan. But the reason was that the main actor and director, Amir Khan, had said that there is growing political intolerance in India. So this is relevant to current situations, that it has become harder and harder to think about the India as a secular nation where all different religions, different ethnicities were equal. And so because of his stance, the film failed commercially. It wasn't able to be shown anywhere. So there are these films there is no linear progression, but it is clear that it's getting harder and harder to be critical about sentiments that conflict accepted ideologies at the moment. So I wish I had been able to show you the clips. You would have enjoyed them, especially listening Sandesh se aate hain, but we don't have the time. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Juneja. And with apologies, because everyone's getting a much shorter time. So hopefully afterwards we'll all have a chance to ask questions and talk more. I'm really sorry not to see these clips. I was looking forward. But anyhow, so now we'll go to Sumaya Sur. Her talk is on munitions of the mouth, alliteration and the tone of war. She's not here. Oh, they didn't tell me. They just told me 5 and 4 are switched. Okay, so then we'll go to Samit. I hope that wasn't me, but sorry. I don't know if I need the microphone. I can probably just... I do? They won't. Anyhow, if we could hear from Samit Biswas on migration policy and humanity, an inevitable challenge to the contemporary global order. So, at the 10-minute mark, I will give you at the 10-minute mark, I'll put this in front of you.
Everybody, it's a nice meeting, and I have an opportunity to give some presentation here. This is my first presentation, so please bear with me. My paper is Migration Policy and Humanity, an invisible challenge of the contemporary global order. Indro, slide 1 ta de. Author profile lagbe na, slide 1 de. Migration Policy and Humanity. Today, I will speak about migration policy and humanity. This is not a theory. This is our daily global reality. Migration is about survival, dignity, rights, and responsibilities. Slide 3 there. Migration today. Migration is not just movement. It is linked to politics, security, and human rights. Migration is now a permanent global reality. Slide 4. People do not live by choice. War, persecution, poverty force them to move. Climate change is creating new refugees. Slide 5. Today, displacement is at a high record. Refugees lose home, identity, and safety. Migration is a humanitarian crisis. Slide 6. The world has frameworks, Global Compact on Refugees and on Migration. They are non-binding, but they shape global cooperation. Slide 7. Migrants are seen as threats. Borders become hard. People become more vulnerable. This is not solve the problem. Slide 8. Migration is not temporary. It is here to stay. We lead long-term policies, not short-term politics. Slide 9. Border policies fail. Walls and fences can't stop migration. They increase suffering and danger. Root causes are ignored. We need a human rights approach, more cooperation, more evidence, more humanity. Migration can't be stopped, but it can be handled with dignity. Thank you.
That was quick. That gave us a little more time, so let's see if we can have at least one question. So, Samit, all right, so it's like there's a built-in unfairness to the way the time is distributed. Okay, so finally, by the way, we started a half hour behind schedule. So, sorry? Oh, okay, so next, let's hear from Professor Rajana Yadav, and her topic is India, the role of informed consent in medical ethics, critical analysis.
No, thank you. Thank you. Okay, only 10 minutes? Only 10 minutes?
That's, how much time does someone tell me? Should you? 15? It is up there, okay, go ahead, 15 minutes, you've got.
Okay, thank you, sir.
10 minutes.
Okay, fine.
I apologize.
Don't mind. Thank you so much, Don Habibi, sir. And very good evening to all dignitaries here. My topic is the role of informed consent in medical ethics, a critical study, a critical analysis. So we know one concept. Okay. The proposed study titled The Role of Informed Consent in the Medical Ethics, critical analysis addressed the principle of the informed consent and its role in the medical ethics. You know, one concept make a patient powerful. As we know, patient means a ill person. But if we talk about the patient consent, means a patient is in autonomous stage. Because the foundation of this concept, informed consent, is the principle of autonomy. So, if we know the meaning of consent, it's derived from the Latin word conjunction of con, meaning together with, and instar, meaning to feel, think, or judge, which indicate the power of willing, knowing, thinking. So, if we go the meaning of consent, Gillon state that the consent means a voluntary action, a voluntary decision made by a sufficiently competent or autonomous person on the basis of adequate information and deliberation to accept rather than reject some proposed course of action that will affect him or her. So, yes, we know the meaning of consent, but when we correlate it the real condition of patient, can we find him as a autonomous person? Because if we go the meaning of in Hindu etymology, we go the meaning of patient mean rogi is aswast, and the swast mean in swast derived from the word swa. Swa is self. So yourself means your decision under your control. You are in the stable condition. Your mind, body cooperate with them. And if we go the condition of patient, we analyze the condition of patient, we say that the patient is aswast. Aswast means yourself is not your control. So how can we correlate this concept, informed consent, to the patient condition? So because if we go to analyze the principle of autonomy, we find we have a moral autonomy, we have rational autonomy, we have relational autonomy. So we talk about which type of autonomy? Moral, rational, relational. So before going to emphasize on the informed consent, we know what medical ethics do. Because we see that each and every medical institute have the medical committee, and the medical committee work on some ethical condition. They also follow the some norms, ethical norms. So how it work? So if one book, Medical Ethics, written by Michael Doom and Tony Hope, discuss the three roles of medical ethics, which solve the various problem related to medical field. The first role is that the architect of medical ethics, who determine the nature and the ethical process. The moral architect design the necessary component to ensure compliance and the proper operation of the ethical process for the smooth functioning of medical system. In addition to the role of architect, medical ethics also work as a facilitator. The facilitator provide the moral and the logical support for impaired decision making and the committee operation. As a guide in the medical ethics, the facilitator upholds some moral values such as the duty, goodwill, justice, compassion, empathy, autonomy. And medical ethics also play the role of judge to ensure the proper structure of a moral judgment. To fulfill So these three are the three types of a role played by the medical committee, architects, facilitator, and judge. So by this concept is important because we know one incident which happened in 1930 Nazi camp, where the individual and the groups were murdered without consent, just under the guise of experiment research. So this tragic history promotes to think about the research ethics, leading to establish a guideline which you give preference the respect for individual autonomy, will, free decision, and after this incident, we find many courts, many committee, many report which focused on the consent concept, informed consent, like as Newmarch Gold, Belmont Report, Declaration of Helsinki, which establish three principles. One principle is to respect the patient autonomy, second is beneficence, and the third is justice. So here we find the informed consent is come as a form of a patient autonomy, and which type of autonomy? We talk about which type of autonomy. Is it rational, moral? So if we, like Grenal Dorwick proposed the criteria in his book, The Theory and the Practice of Autonomy, including logical consistency, the characteristic of autonomy. If we find here, he explained that logical consistency, empirical possibility, value condition, ideological neutrality, normative relevance, and judgmental relevance. These are the characteristics of the autonomous stage. And if we characterize the moral agency, moral autonomy, we find a person is morally autonomous if they are the author of their moral principles. A person is a moral autonomous if they choose their own moral principle. A person is moral autonomous if the ultimate authority for their moral principle is their own will. A person is moral autonomous if they decide which moral principle to accept as a binding, and a person is moral autonomous if they accept moral responsibility for the principle they act upon, and a person is moral autonomous if they reject other as a moral authority. So these are the characteristics of the moral autonomy. Why I am explaining this concept? Because if we think about the condition of patient, can we correlate it? Can we relate it the moral autonomous stage? Because we find here that the first person who guide him is physician. Informed concept is the combination of two concepts. One is inform, and the second is consent. So informed is given by, information is given by the physician. Then after physician information, we as a patient we accept any treatment, we reject any treatment. So first guide is a peer is a physician. As we know, before it, one concept is paternalism. Paternalism is like here another person play the role of decision maker, and in the medical field, physician play the role of the decision maker, and after physician, the family member play the role of decision maker. But this concept focused on the strong position of the patient. Patient can decide, patient can reject any treatment, patient can accept any treatment. So but my research is focused on the real condition of patient, and both doctor and patient relation. As we are okay sir, we find here the shared decision making process. Shared decision making process like relational autonomy. I accept relational autonomy because I find that the patient is not as ordinary person. Because like if we go to I'm very much accept the Indian philosophy concept of consciousness, where the Indian philosophy in Upanishad we find 5 layers of consciousness: Annamaya Kosh, Pranamaya Kosh, Manomaya Kosh, Vijnanamaya Kosh, and Anandamaya Kosh. These sheets, it's focused on the your physical body, your feeling, your mental condition, your blissful stage, your emotion, and all the layers linked each other. So a healthy person can work the full combination of these 5 consciousness. And if we see that we are ill, we are patient, the one layers, if one layer is affected, then other layer also affected. And we also see in the Descartes philosophy, Descartes mind-body relation. If mind affected, then your body also affected. Mind affect your body, and body also affect your mind. So how can we say that a person, a patient is a fully autonomous being who can choose anything, who have a rational approach? So I work on the one model which is a conjunction model. In a logic, in logic conjunction model focused on the two relational model. P dot Q is a conjunction model. If P is true and Q is true, then result will come in the true. But if P is false, Q is true, then result is false. If P true, Q false, then result is also false. And if P false, Q false, then result is also false. Means if both can cooperate, then result will come in good, it will in a good favor. Like if physician guide patient, if physician communicate patient, if physician do counseling, and patient also cooperate, truth the telling, don't hide any information, and trust also work on it, then result will come in a favor of patient. So here is my presentation is work on this. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Yadav. I don't. Everyone tells me different things. It's 4:56. We've picked up a few minutes. Go ahead. You've got it.
Yes, why not? Because the human. Humanity work behind any stream. Without humanity, no stream can exist. So if medicines also involve humanity, in commerce, in science, all have the concept of humanity. So without humanities, medicine cannot exist. That's why we focus on the some moral values like empathy, communication, compassion, justice. So yes, it is related to medical humanities also.
I just want to add on that this medical ethics is not a new part, actually. In our civilization from the ancient past, if you go to Puspita, Karaka, all about medical ethics. What we are having today, which is that was there in the
Cherokee. Yeah.
These are new fields where researches are being done. Actually, medical humanities talk about the medicine, the illness, with a combination of the film, visual art, impression. Like if I take an example of, if I'm reading Mahesh Dattani's 30 Days in September, a short story, where a patient, how a patient and doctor relation is being done. So that kind of stories are being, researchers are being done on those kind of stories, where medical humanity is being used. That is after she was talking about the medical ethics.
I think everybody should go to our reading literature, which is there from our ancient and Ayurveda, to go through that. Then we can understand how the colonization, after the colonization, our medicine was shifted from Ayurveda or metals, it was metals and surgery. But later after the colonization, it was all these literatures are available.
Thank you, ma'am. You are mentioning of Ayurveda and Charak Samhita. There is also one stream is Achara Samhita. and it's focus on the conduct. Social conduct, individual conduct. So be healthy, you follow some moral rules. So in Achar Sanhita we find all the rules, moral rules which we follow, and this is also related to, yes, in a yoga like Yama Niyam also it is in the Achar Sanhita. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our speakers. Apologies to our speakers. And I think now we have a cultural show, so we're going to have song and dance.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much. We are winding up day one with this beautiful session, and I would like to request here our participants and respected speakers and guests that we will be we have organized a very small cultural program which will be done by our college students, and it will be held in our college campus in our administrative block. So all are requested to gather in our administrative building, Siliguri College of Commerce, on the main campus. Okay, from 5 we will start our cultural program and we'll wind up the day one. Thank you very much. Thank you. Tomorrow, hello, please, one more thing, one more information, that tomorrow we'll start our session from 10 a.m. From 10 a.m. we'll start our sessions, technical sessions. Then we have lunch from 1:30. Then we'll go with the next session as well. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Session. Tomorrow the same timing from 10 a.m. dot 10 a.m. we will start our first session at Dinabandhu Mancho, where we have started today. The first session, inaugural session was there. And the second session will be here only, and the lunch time will be same and the same venue. That is main administrative building, main campus. Thank you so much. Now I would like to request all our dignitaries and the participants to please proceed towards the main campus in open stage, where we will experience a cultural program conducted and organized by our students and definitely you will enjoy 1 hour, that is from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. There will be a cultural program followed by a high tea. So please, all are requested to move forward towards the cultural program venue. Thank you.